Hello! It's been a while, but for the good reasons. I've been working for the last 4 months on the joinery of my house, and it's almost impossible to describe how big of a journey it's been. I really never did carpentry until today, but instead of focusing on the whole project, let's focus on this specific joinery, which goes in this part of the house. And this allows me to have a second bedroom on the second floor. In Japanese joinery, you often use your carpenter square as a guide for the joinery. Because the width of the carpenter square is 15 millimeters, it actually allows you to do a lot of things around that width. Here you see me doing the markings of the beam that will have a very long tenon that goes through the other post. When sewing, it's important to always see the lines that you're sewing. So make sure to be patient when using hand tools and that you're sewing whatever you can see. If the lines are not visible, it's better to actually turn the piece around. You will see me using almost only Japanese tools other than planers, which I'm still getting the hands on when it comes to Japanese planes. But when it comes to complicated cuts, I'd rather do them by hand as I have more time to think and slowly take an approach into the cut. But when it comes to straight cuts that are easier, I use often the power saw. To finish, I always use my saw and then I can tap the piece and just let it go. Another important stage that is easy to forget, at least for me, is to project your markings that are on the face after you've done a cut. So that's what I'm doing. I am making sure that I'm connecting all the dots so that I can follow my cuts and finish it properly. Here I am kerfing the tenon a little bit above the markings. This allows me to tap the wood afterwards and remove all those loose pieces. But when it comes to the end of the tenon, I want to preserve most of its length and I want to keep it neat. So I usually tend to do that with a chisel so that the finish is cleaner. One thing that I've learned and has made me appreciate more woodworking itself is to take real care of my tools. I think that when your tools are performing at your expectation, they are very sharp, they feel balanced and they feel like they are doing the necessary work, that's when woodworking becomes more synergetic and the ideas that you have are easily applied. If you have a tool that is not sharp or blunt, it can become quickly frustrating and very tiresome. And I've been in that position many times where I actually regret not spending the time to take care of the tool and sharpening it properly. And once it's done, I'm like, why didn't I do this before? I would rather use hand tools almost at any given moment, but the reality of the project is just too big for me. There's 500 joints and there's a lot to be done. So finding the balance between power tools and hand tools is something that I find it interesting to explore, and I've come to the conclusion that I use them only when it really feels like a necessity. What you see me doing here are mortises, square mortises that go through, that allow a peg to be inserted, and there's an offset between the squares and then the post. That offset allows the post to be snagged into the tenon. it'll make more sense afterwards. When using a saw, you want to put your finger as a support on the initial cut. And as I've said before, only saw the lines that you see. The more precise you become, the closer you will actually saw onto the line. But it's very important to leave the line, as the line is the final cut. If you've cut the line, you're already exposing yourself to having a joint that won't be snug. This is something that I saw in a documentary of a Japanese carpenter that said something that made me laugh at the beginning, but over the months I've been actually taking it very seriously, which is you want to shave half of your marking to be sure that you're being accurate. Now it's time to move to the post. So this post will host the beam, and it has a mortise that allows the tenon to go through, as well as a casing, I think it's called, that will also support the load of this big beam. And things get more intricate in terms of precision because the casing that will host the beam needs to be perfect. If not, it changes the length of the whole room. I'm not gonna lie, I was actually worried at this stage. I was like, I don't actually know how to do this. And I found different methods. This is one of them. I filmed all of them, but I think it's just redundant to put. And I put a little piece there to support me while I was chiseling away the right amount of wood. And this helps me not to jump all the way to the bottom and be more accurate with my pushing slick. And I also want to remind you that it's better to do the deep cuts like the mortise before doing joinery around. You want to get through the wood before you do joinery around that mortise. And the reason is quite simple. You want to have a flat surface to work with your tools, and the chain mortiser needs a flat surface, obviously. So if I did that tapered edge or that housing, casing, whatever it's called, I couldn't use my mortiser properly. Finally, the moment of truth has come, and this is my first test fit, and I could feel that it was snug, almost too snug, but I still decided to give it a try. It's quite characteristic in Japanese joinery to have very snug fits. They allow more friction between wood and wood, and thus having a more rigid construction. When I started my woodworking journey, I got quite lucky. I found a good amount of walnut that was dried already for many years, and I got it very cheap. And it's a beautiful, beautiful walnut. So there's nothing better to actually use this walnut for the pegs so that I can have some contrast between the pieces. I did them by hand. I forgot to film the sewing, but they are beautiful and they fit perfectly. And this is what I was mentioning before, that the mortise of the tenon, which is the little square hole that you see there, is offset with the post, which allows the peg to really push both pieces together. I would say actually pull the pieces together. In order to have the joinery really clean and finished, I use a very thin blade, and I do a cut between the two joints that allows me to perfectly fit them together, and that actually ends up being the correct length that I want to have in the room at the very end. It took me about 2 to 3 days to do both these beams. I have 2 of them, and the results were really great, so I was really happy about it. Thanks for watching and see you on the next one.